So in our movies component, right above the movies table, I have added a new component, search box. This search box is a controlled component, so it doesn't have its own state. It gets all the data via props and notifies changes by raising events. Instead of building this component, I could simply add an input field here, but I decided to encapsulate that input field inside of a search box so we would have a simpler interface to work with. Let me explain what I mean. Look at this onChange event. It's handled by this method. Let's have a look at this method. So handle search. Here's the method. Note that it gets a query. This is a string. If I added an input field in this form, this handler would get E, short for event. Then we would have to do something like e.currentTarget.value. That's boring. And then we'll have to repeat this every time. So that's why I put this input field inside of a component. This component raises an event. In the handler, we get a string. That is the query that the user types in the input field. Now in this handler, we're setting the state. So we set the search query to what we get here. Also, we reset selected genre for the reason I explained to you. And we also set current page to 1. If we don't reset the current page, it is possible that the user might be, let's say, on page 3. Then they search for something, and let's imagine we only have 1 page of result. If the current page is still on 3, the user will not be able to see the search result. Okay? Also, I have modified handle genre select. So if the user selects a genre, we set that here, and at the same time, we reset the search query to an empty string. In case you're wondering why I didn't set this to null to be consistent with the code below, the reason for this is because here we're dealing with a controlled component, that is our search box. So earlier you learned that when you're working with control elements or control component, you cannot use null or undefined. Otherwise, React thinks you're working with an uncontrolled component. So the moment the user types something in an input field, React is going to get confused, thinking you're trying to convert an uncontrolled component into a controlled component. Also, here on the top where we initialize the state, I initialized search query to an empty string, and I also added selected genre. Previously, we didn't have this before, and our page worked perfectly fine, but I decided to list all these parameters here and initialize them, so the next developer reading this code doesn't have to do much guesswork. Everything is well documented in the code. Now let's take a look at the implementation of our search box. So we have a simple stateless functional component. Here we're returning an input, give it a name, a couple of bootstrap classes, form control you have seen before. This one, my-3, that is short for margin. Why? So we're applying margin on the y-axis, which means top and bottom. And 3 is the amount of margin. We also have a placeholder. We set the value based on what we get from our props object. And finally, we handle the onChange event. And here, basically, we raise a custom event with the value of the input field. So this is how we are simplifying the interface of an input field. Next time we want a search box, we don't have to repeat all this code. We simply use our search box component. So this is the big picture. Now back to our movies component. Let's take a look at getPageData method. In this method, we filter, sort, and paginate data. I have changed our filtering logic. So previously we had a constant called filter. I changed that to a variable. So initially we set filtered to all movies. Now, if you have a search query, we call allmovies.filter, where m goes to, now we get the title of the movie, convert it to lowercase, and check to see if it starts with this search query in lowercase. Otherwise, if we have genre, we filter movies by the selected genre. So this part is exactly like before. Now, personally, I'm not quite happy with this implementation. I think all this logic around searching and filtering is a little bit ugly, maybe more than a little bit. In the future, I'm going to show you how to simplify this implementation using a custom collection.